Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It is your Caped Crusader, Cody. We are keeping it geekly with our brand new friend, Laurie Cunningham of ASAP Imagination. Laurie, welcome to the stream. How are you doing? You are not only a writer for ASAP, but also the editor-in-chief. That's awesome. How did you end up coming into the ASAP Imagination label?
So when I first started writing, like I haven't actually been doing it too long. I basically joined Twitter, and it was actually I was taking these kind of creative writing courses just for fun. And one of the assignments was actually to join Twitter and start an author platform, which I was hugely resistant to. Like I barely had Facebook at the time. I'm like, oh good, more social media that I'm not really interested in. And then it was just kind of, I met a whole bunch of people online and a whole bunch of friends. And I guess I'd been dabbling in writing, but once you kind of tell people you're a writer, you kind of like, oh damn, I better actually start writing. So then I started like working on some novels, and they weren't really working for me. I think I have a bit of a scattered brain where I kind of joke I'm really good at writing the first 10,000 words. And then from there, I'm like, uh-oh, like, I don't know where to go from there. So then I kind of started writing short stories. And then at the start, I was writing more fantasy. And then I kind of started connecting with more of the horror community. Like I was writing dark fantasy. So it was like a natural kind of slide over. And then, yes, I started writing short stories. And then I ran across Hades, which is who's the founder of ASAP Imagination. And we were just chatting and we were just goofing around with like gifts or something. And then we kind of just like ended up in the DMs and stuff. And we were basically kind of like, we're just like, hey, you know what? Like you seem to kind of have like a good kind of vibe together. Like maybe it'd be fun to do a project with. And at the time, like I'm trying to do my own stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, that'd be fun. And we kind of just kept in contact, and he was doing his 9-to-5 job at the time. And then just as things go, like he ended up leaving that job, and it was the pandemic, so it kind of ended up being in this perfect time for him to start a comic book company. And I was still very adjacent on the side, and I had a new baby somewhere around there. I think it was before he quit his job. And then I was trying to write, and it was hard, and I had some postpartum depression.
Babies throw monkey wrenches and everything, right?
Yeah, it was really hard. And I was basically like, my brain was just mush. And I was like, wanted to do something, but it just wasn't working. And then it was around when my daughter was almost a year. And he was like legit he had set up his comic book company, and we had talked, like I said, we talked about doing this project together. And we kind of talked about doing these short stories centered around one event. And he's just like, oh, well, in my comic book universe, there's an event that would work perfectly for this.
He's like, so happens.
Yeah, what a coincidence. That actually happens a lot with us. We're like, what a coincidence. This just happens to be perfectly lined up. So yeah, and then we basically, at the start, I was just like, absolutely not. Like, I can barely write at all. I can barely find time. Like, I'm just like struggling to stay afloat as it is, just with momming. And then, but you know what? He's very convincing. So I'm just like, okay, well, we'll try. And he started, and it's almost like as soon as he pitched like this kind of idea, I'm like, I thought of a story. So I like started writing it, and then he just started going, and then like we started getting one story out after another, and he was kind of just like, yeah, just go. And then all of a sudden he picked a deadline. And then again, it was just like at this like panicky, like you're crazy moment.
Yeah, deadlines make everything real, right?
Yeah, it's actually like, I know like a lot of people talk about how writing is like so solitary and stuff, and having an accountability partner, someone who's just like, we're going to release at this date. Like that was like really like, that did it. And then, yes, I mean, it is great for that. And just like, kind of having someone to like, who's fully invested in it, and like doing like a co-author, obviously you both like are working on each other's and bouncing ideas off of each other. So yeah, we had a deadline, and then basically I was still very like on the side, like his cheerleader for his comic book company. But we got to this one story where we kind of like merged our two stories, or our like two sets of stories together, and the timelines weren't quite lining up. So I had to rewrite this one story, and it kind of got to the end, and we were brainstorming again, and he's like, this is a comic book character. I'm just like, neat. What does that mean? Basically, I'm like, what do you want me to do with that?
What do I do with this?
Because this is basically, I was going to have like do a project with him and then get back on the sidelines and like, okay, yeah, you go do your comics. I'll go do like, pretend I know how to write novels.
So was that Points of Villainy and Points of Virtue?
Yeah, that was the one.
So can you give us a little bit of a breakdown? That's a really interesting book, because you guys took the stories and kind of put them backwards, right?
Yeah, so yeah, I know that he's talked about it a bit. So it's like a flip book. So it has 16 stories, and there's like kind of 8 really dark stories where we each wrote 4 and 4, and then you basically, it's like kind of like almost like the tragedy side of it. And then you flip it over, and it's kind of like the not comedy side, but like the hopeful side, I suppose. Like it's still, both sides are still really dark. Like they're both very like horror thriller kind of stories, and then yeah, and like that's like flip book, and it's kind of all circled around the event which happens in the ASAP universe, which is basically where all of like the storylines kind of come from. Like there's like this big catalyst, and there's like the before and the after and all that stuff. So this was like the event, so it's kind of a glimpse into that, and it's like 16 different stories of just 16 very random people and like how they experience it, and they're not superly abled or anything like that, so they're just like the ordinary people just experiencing the extraordinary, I suppose. So
it also appears that you had another publication that came out during ASAP's first charity anthology, which was your first gig as the editor-in-chief as well, correct?
Yeah, so I didn't start it as the editor-in-chief, but I kind of ended it as that, because it's like a huge project management thing where, again, like Hades had this idea, we wanted to do a charity, and he picked dyspraxia as the charity because that's near and dear to his heart, with his son has that condition. And yeah, it was basically, we kind of just like put a submission call out there, and we had a whole bunch of people submit, and we were able to take a good chunk of them. And there was just a whole bunch of great stories, and it was just an open theme. So it was just horror, fantasy, and sci-fi. And we had a good mix of people. And we had a good mix of people who'd already written stuff, and about half were completely new. It was their first publication. So it was just really fun. And I snuck a story in there and worked with, we had like a whole bunch of people who volunteered their times. We had our editor and our cover designer. And yeah, it was like this great little, it was our first charity book, and everyone got their stuff out there, and now it's become something that we want to do every year in different formats and different charities and stuff. So yeah, that was awesome. Kind of the moment there was a lot coming together, and Hades was just like, hey, you want to be EIC?
Speaking of Hades, like, though, we have ASAP Imagination over on YouTube saying Laurie is the best tag team partner ever.
Thanks, Hades.
So we also have a really interesting book that I think, did it already release the Babies with Rabies ABC Survival Guide?
No, so that one's coming up soon. So that one's a little outside of ASAP. That was like this personal project, and it's just something that, again, it was, I was gonna go the traditional publishing route, because I did kind of start in novels and like traditional publishing before I switched over to comics. So I like queried some agents and stuff, and it's just like, it's pretty inappropriate parenting advice. So and it's like, I don't like target audience. Like it's not a typical children's book, and it's satire, and like there's not a lot of people that want to represent that.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the beauty of indie, though, where it's just like when you want to self-publish, you basically can just test out your like wild ideas and your niche ideas, and just put something out there, and it doesn't, like, if no one else is going to champion it, you get to do it, and you get to do it your own way. And like, and that's kind of the same thing we do at ASAP, where it's like, because we're small and because we're a little tight-knit group of people, we're able to just basically champion people's stories, because self-publishing's hard. Like there's a lot of work. Like it's so nice when people sign you up and you're like, here's my story. It's like, give me a budget, so go do the marketing. Like give me not that you necessarily getting a huge paycheck with some of that, but it's like, just you kind of sit back and kind of hope. Whereas like our whole thing with ASAP, and like that's why we created the Any One World platform, which is the creator-owned platform where people can submit their own stories, is basically to help people. It's just like, it's hard. It's hard doing it by yourself, and it's hard put it out there. And like, we're new too, and it's just we're all just helping each other and doing the best we can. So and that was kind of the same thing that like Perspectives was, that the charity anthology, and that has kind of started it all. Like it's just kind of 16 strangers, and all of a sudden we're just working together to promote this book and raise money for a charity. And
that's so cool, though.
Yeah, it's just like, it's really cool. It's really cool how tightly knit people can become in this little, like, it's like, yeah, we're all friends, but like you start to build a family and stuff too. So
well, I mean,
it's really fun that way.
It's different too, because like the friends that you make doing this, like these are friends you made like following your passion. And I think that's almost different than friends you made like just growing up, you know what I mean? Because like these are people you could be like, yo, I'm making a comic. Then you're like, no way, like let me support you. When like friends from high school are like, oh, I don't care about that. Like it's a whole different playing field.
Yeah, all of my friends that I kind of made, my offline friends is kind of what I tell them. Like they're just kind of people that you like happen across. Like you happen to be at school together, you happen to be at a job together, or like they're a friend of a friend, so you make a new friend. But like you don't necessarily have a ton in common, especially as I find as you grow up and you develop different interests. But finding like an online writing and comic community was like invaluable. And suddenly I have all these people who care about the same things I do. Whereas a lot of people care about me and are supportive of what I do, but they don't necessarily care about the what as much, is kind of how I think about it. So it's nice having that little community.
Before we dive into what we're here to talk about most, I am curious, what all goes into your role as editor-in-chief for ASAP Imagination? Like, how's that role for you? You know, what do you typically do? And, you know, I guess, what all does it entail?
It's a bit of a mix. I kind of doubt it's probably the stereotypical, like what other editor-in-chiefs do, kind of, because I kind of am, it's a bit of a jack of all trades. And I think Hades and I both have that, like we both have our kind of roles we play and like all that stuff. So like I find that I'm doing a lot of like working with the creator-owned stuff and kind of contacting people and going through submissions and reading stories and kind of being, so it's like a bit of an acquisitions editor in a way, and kind of looking for the potential and looking for the problems and the fixes and stuff like that. So, and it's working with a lot of creators, and like a lot of our stuff that people submit is comics. And so it's kind of, I've had a bit of a learning curve, and kind of, especially with writing my own comics, like the one that I got coming out is, I was brand new. So I'm having to learn a lot, and then I kind of apply what I learned to some of these other people who are coming in new. And so yeah, it has a bit of like a project management vibe, if anything. Like I'm not the typical editor. I don't have a whole bunch of editing certifications and stuff. I just kind of still have to Google like the various tense of lie and lay and stuff like that. Some things just never stick in your brain. But that's why there's manuals and all that stuff that help you, so you don't have to just keep that in your brain. But yeah, it's just a big mixed bag of stuff. And it's like, I used to do a lot more of like the digital graphics and marketing stuff, but then we had someone who kind of came on who was better at Photoshop and stuff than I was. So it's kind of just wherever I'm needed. And I have a business background, which like helps that it doesn't. I end up looking at a lot of contracts, and not that I'm a lawyer at all, but there's it's just like wherever I can feel a need, basically. So
how was the mix? How was the transition from, you know, your traditional like sense of writing to writing a comic script? You know, what was that like for you? Were there any challenges you had to overcome?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because like I was like so intimidated by it at the start, and like I had read some of the comic scripts that Hades had sent me about from his comics, and like so I had an idea of like how they go and like formatting and stuff, but I kind of had to learn stuff, and he was mentoring me. But I was like pretty reluctant, like, you know, when something's kind of new and intimidating, so you just kind of avoid it as long as possible.
and then you're like, oh, now I got to do it, so let's do it.
It's like, okay, I need to like actually do this. And finally, like I was trying to do it in like the classic like script and panel layouts, and finally I'm just like, I need to put this aside for a second and just like get the story out. And so originally like Sister Grimm was supposed to be a graphic novel, and then we kind of chopped her up into more of like the 4-issue miniseries. So originally I just had puked out a graphic novel essentially, and then I kind of had it like vaguely like panel dialogue, basic descriptions. So now I'm kind of having to go back and just be like, okay, what does this actually like look like on a page? And like what, like, yes, the panel is these two talking, but like what else is there? Like where are they? So it was almost very much like a bullet point script, and then I kind of had to go and slot it in. And it's interesting because you have to because you're confined to like your page limit and stuff. So it's like typically when you're writing regular stories, it seems like you have like a word count range, whereas this one's like, you got to do it in 22 pages.
Yeah. and panels
and then
too.
And it's just like, you need this, you can't have too many panels. I guess you can have few panels to some extent, but like whatever the story needs, right? But I know like for this one, for the first issue of Sister Grimm, I know that I needed one, like, because you know how you have to do the page reveals. And I had one, it was classically on the wrong side, and I'm like, okay, how do I get this on the other side?
So, how did we get here?
Yeah, and then I ended up I was just like, oh, and when the page I added at the time just felt like oh, it's just filler and fluff, and then like when the artist drew it, I'm like, oh, it's emotional. This page actually is probably like one of the best pages now. So I'm like, this is great. But
it's
yeah, so it was just.
For me, like if it just seems like when writing like a graphic novel and then going to like a comic, you lose like that ability to have like the inner dialogue from the character. When you're reading a book, you can like you have that sense of what the character's feeling, what they're thinking, and then you almost have to, like, I wouldn't say dilute it, but condense it a lot more for comics. It seems like that in itself would be such a challenge.
Yeah, well, and I know with like, so this first issue is very much, it's so that there's two main characters in this like whole story, and there's Lily and Bennett doesn't really make an appearance till the end. So it's very much just Lily, and I was kind of, it was very text light. And I was kind of, and when I was writing, I was talking to Hades, I'm like, do I need to have narration here? I feel like it's a lot of just like art and like not a lot of text. And I know, like, personally, when I read comics, sometimes I like them to be a good amount of text, so it feels like you get, like, it slows you down, I guess. And it's so you start to feel like you're spending more time reading a comic and you get more value on it. And he was just like, you could, but he's just like, but let the art tell the story. And so I've ended up kind of not leaning towards the narration thing, because obviously you can put the little boxes of them in like in speech bubble or thought bubbles and stuff everywhere. But kind of just like, okay, let's just let the artist tell the story. And it ended up being like great. The artist did a fantastic job, and I think the emotion and the mood comes through. So yeah, it was a bit of like kind of like the taking the leap of faith and just kind of trusting, I guess, that the artist, and that's kind of what the whole, what comics are. It's like you're like, sure, I came up with the story, but I really rely on the artist to convey the emotion and the story through that. Like, even though we're working together, like it's definitely a team. Like, you can't, like, one doesn't exist without the other.
No, absolutely. We have Oblivia over on Twitch stopping in to say hi as well. So speaking of the artist, can you give us a little bit more about the creative team involved with this? And I loved the way they told the story, like the preview image I seen. It really adds to that horror element when you don't have words and you just have like just the art, like letting it, show what's happening.
Yeah, and like I didn't send you any with text. I think I just sent you the final colors. So I think I think the one stuff I sent you there actually.
So the one is the picture we have on the image slideshow is I think they're at the morgue and the peeking around the corner. So is that page? Yeah. Oh, is there supposed to be text on it?
Yeah. No. So that one's complete. So yeah, and I think that like you have those moments where like you have to kind of like look for all the nuance and stuff, and I love the color palette that we kind of decided on, and like the artist did a great job. I mean, he has this kind of like surreal watercolor feel to it, so it just really suits the mood, because it's kind of like melancholy and eerie, but like beautiful, and like, because it's basically like this whole kind of issue is about this kind of loss of who you were and trying to figure out who you are now. And the whole time she's trying to like figure out if her family's still alive and all that stuff. So like there's a lot of loss and darkness and sadness in this, but then I threw in Bennett, which he's just like witty and reckless, and so you gotta lighten it up and add a little bit of humor, and he's kind of that, so you're not just reading this being like, I'm so depressed.
Yeah, the concept of Sister Grimm is about Lily Connors waking up in a morgue, having no memories of the last 3 months since the event, and that's the event that you're talking about that happened within the ASAP verse, right? The world.
Yeah. So she appears in Points of Villainy, Points of Virtue, and she actually appears in two stories. She was kind of the story that connected to the two sides. Like, the first story is told from her daughter's perspective, who's 6, and then the other side is kind of that's them fleeing London, and she's a doctor. So the second story in Points of Virtue is her going back to London, and because this all takes place in the UK.
You said she's a doctor?
Yeah.
Is there any excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but is there any symbolism behind her being a doctor and then waking up in a morgue?
There is a lot of symbolism. Like it wasn't like that's kind of like how it all happens. Like basically, she had like a little spoiler here on points of virtue. Like her main story, like she's going back to London and she has this run-in with like the physical form of death. And like she's kind of being haunted by like her past and stuff, and this comic basically picks up, except 3 months later from that, because she like doesn't have her memories, and so like picks up like in the morgue in a hospital, and that's basically she's had this like death experience and kind of like how it's affected her, and she has these like new abilities that she's trying to deal with and stuff that are very opposite to what she used to do. So, and obviously the comic's called Sister Grimm, so it's not like a huge surprise like what her abilities might be, but we kind of want to keep people guessing a little bit of like what all her powers are going to be. So
I love the way you set off the story too. I mean, just the overall concept is really intriguing. It almost gives me 28 Days Later vibes, like where he wakes up in the hospital and there's like the zombie outbreak and he has no idea where he's at. And he like,
I actually haven't seen that, and I
it's
love
based in the
zombie
UK,
movies, but
I
they
think.
terrify me at the same time. So I like have to like build up to watch them.
Yeah, I want to say that one was actually based in the UK, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I'm gonna have to watch it. But yeah, it could be like that.
So what type of influences can we see within this, though? I mean, what inspired you to create this story?
I don't know specifically what inspired it. Like I know, like because it came from points of villainy, points of virtue, and we're just writing short stories. Like I like to say that story is kind of like they're very like Ray Bradbury-esque. Like they're kind of sci-fi, they're kind of paranormal, and they make you think, and they kind of have that horror element and vibe. So that was probably the influence for her. Into the comics and stuff, I think it's a bit like I don't want to be like that kind of person who's just like, oh, but just put myself in the story. But like there's definitely a bit, because like it's like her family, and like it kind of deals with like some depression, and I kind of have mentioned that like Lily's like she's my depression and Bennett's my coping mechanism for my depression. So you kind of have like, so like I have a bit of that, and then I just like kind of like favorite creators and stuff. Like when I was writing novels, or when trying to write novels, V. Schwab, she writes these like dark fantasies, and I think she probably had some influence. And then once I started getting into comics and stuff like Watchmen, I think that was like that big kind of key moment for me where I'm like, oh, this is what comics can do. So obviously like, and I haven't read his other stuff, but like I've seen like V for Vendetta and stuff. So like Alan Moore obviously is going to have some kind of, because I know like he's kind of considered like basically the guy who kind of made comics more adult. Essentially. Like it wasn't so targeted toward kids. Like they're like, these are like adult subject matter now. So I'm sure he was an influence there too, but I don't know if I can. Sometimes when I start talking about comic creators, I'm like, I don't know enough about them to like feel like I can talk about them with like authority or anything. But
no, hey, I'm the podcaster here, and I'm in the same boat. Like I was like, people start talking about, and I'm like, okay, Alan Moore, like Watchmen, yes. Anything outside of that, I'm like, oh god.
Oh yeah.
Let me get on Google real quick. We have Mad Monty art over on YouTube, stopping in to say hi as well. All right, so right here is the pre-order and I put that in the link. I put the link in the comments for everyone to check out with us. So right here is issue 1 of Sister Grimm, and just a little bit look at the cover. I love the art in this. This is gorgeous. What was some of your inspiration for this design?
We kind of basically just went a little bit with the opening scene, and obviously there's like this Grim Reaper vibe to the whole story, and there's death is a very common theme in this because of who she is and what she experiences and stuff. But then again, like we just we found this artist, and it basically got connected through another one of our artists, and he just had this vibe, like Nicolas Dieto, like he's just great, and he had this like, some of his stuff is just really beautiful, and it's kind of gritty and stuff. So, and then we kind of, again, almost accidentally settled on this cover, or maybe, or at least to me, it feels accidental. I'm sure it was very purposeful from him, but like kind of settled on this color palette and stuff. And it just like I said, it just kind of has this mix of like dark and beautiful is what we're going for, and then like, but a little bit gritty and stuff. So like these kind of got like, it's like, artistic sprays and stuff, and it just really suits like the whole mood of her story. And so yeah, it's really sweet. And then it just kind of, this is basically the morgue where she wakes up. So
so any symbolism behind the Jane Doe, or was that something the artist threw on there just for a little flair?
No, it's just, so she doesn't, so it's basically like because she wakes up and there is.
Okay, we don't have to spoil anything.
I was just like, I'm about to get into a huge ramble here. It's just like, but she does wake up and like she has this like toe tag, and it just basically has like a Jane Doe thing. But yes, there is symbolism behind that as well.
Yeah. If you don't want to spoil anything, we don't have to. I'm good at fishing for that, so
yeah. I don't feel like I'm spoiling anything because it's like in the first like page.
So what we could do now is we will transition into the new writer that you guys just had join ASAP Imagination.
Yeah, so this is through the Anyone world, and we have a whole bunch of creators who submit their comics and their novels and stuff to us. So far, we've had mostly comics and graphic novels that have been released, but this is a new guy. His name's Simmer Sandu, and he just released his debut comic yesterday, which is pretty
exciting. Yeah.
And he does the story and the art, which is always super fun. I'm always very envious of the people who can draw their own comics. So yeah, and it's his first one, and it's great, and it's all like black and white, and it's horror, and it's fun. It gives me a little bit of the, oh no, now I can't think of what it is. There's like this like the UK one with Simon Pegg when he's a cop, Hot Fuzz. It has a little bit of that, but like less humor, I suppose. Like, but it has like the like kind of story and stuff. Kind of gives me a bit of that vibe, at least in issue 1. So.
I'm loving the black and white. I think horror done in this style, you could really emphasize a lot. I'm loving the name too, Meat Machine. It's such a catchy name.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm excited for him. Like, it's so like my favorite part of being the editor-in-chief is just working with people and putting their stuff out there. Like, it's fun working with people who aren't new to this and are a little more seasoned and stuff, but like there's something about working with new people. And I know, like, with my artist for Sister Grimm, like, he's new too, and it's just like, yay, it's our first comic. So it's like, but like, it's always awesome when you're like producing something new. And so I'm so excited.
They have that giddiness. It's like infectious almost, right? Like it motivates you, right?
Yeah, for sure. So it's always fun doing something new, but it's fun carrying on with people. Like, I know with like Hades and stuff, like them and I are like, every time we get something new come out there, like, we did it again. You have to take a moment and remember to celebrate Hades. There's a lot to do. There's always something to do next, but
we'll go ahead and just kind of scroll down through some of the other books available right now too. Birth of Golden Arm, chapter 1.
Yeah, Eddie. That one came out last month, and it's another newbie who did all of his own art and story.
And then we have Origins. This one is from Shane, right?
Yeah, and he's out of Australia, which is pretty fun too, because like I love the whole like online world where it's like it's the pandemic's kind of like a double-edged sword where you're kind of a little isolated from people, but in a weird way it's kind of opened things up because everyone went online to find some connections. So this guy's out of Australia. So I love this too.
This is like 3 different stories in one too, right?
Yeah. I think there's actually 4. There's kind of like a prologue.
Okay, I gotcha. We have Paul Nolan over on YouTube. Her story is fantastic. Introduction to the character. So I'm not sure if maybe Paul is one of your followers.
Oh yeah. So, and he's actually, if you scroll down, you'll eventually see his name. He's got something coming out with us later, probably next year. But yeah, so yeah, there's a really good, like, Origins is basically the origin stories of like 3 kind of siblings and like how their powers and stuff. And so there's a whole bunch of kind of spin-offs, or not, I don't know, spin-offs the right word, but basically kind of each is going to get their kind of own series.
And then we have Dog Eaters. So this was Malcolm, right?
Yeah. And he's living in Tokyo, so he's another.
Yeah, you guys have a diverse category of writers.
We're all, like we got a good chunk of the U.S. and North America, which always kind of seems to be a thing. But like, and then Lance is from the U.S. and stuff, and his was the first graphic novel that came through us.
Yeah, we had Lance on not too long ago. I loved going over Bob. It was such a really interesting concept.
Yeah, it's good, and I love it because it's like he's got like it has like it's very cartoony, like it's not so realistic drawing, but like it's dark.
Hmm.
So I love it. And yeah, and it's like beautiful with all the blues and stuff. Like
Yeah, yeah.
total kudos to his arts. Total kudos to all the artists, really. Like they're all very good at figuring out how to tell their stories.
And then right here is Paul Nolan. Apes. Did I say that right?
Yep. Yeah, it's just AIPS, but
Cool.
in my head I call it apes.
And then
Yeah,
Mitch is another that I see on Twitter all the time. Mitch Larkins. Another
Yeah.
familiar name.
Yeah, all of these ones right now are novels that are going to be coming out. No, I stand corrected. Some of them are novels. And then, yeah, and then we have like a few kind of behind the scenes people in the works. We got more comics coming. Like we just always have people submitting to us, and we're
That is
working
so
behind the
awesome.
scenes hard to get stuff out. And we're gonna have another charity thing coming out soon. And so we're busy. We're busy, but we're always looking for more. Always looking for more work because it's always fun working with people.
All right, let's go ahead and we'll get this removed and go back to our main screen. So after going through all of that, for anyone that is on the fence about pre-ordering Sister Grimm, what would you like to say to them directly to kind of just push them over that bump? You know, what's the importance of pre-ordering this issue?
It just gets to be like you can probably have it in your hands faster than I do because like I'm in Canada, so maybe get them all first. And you get to hold my comic before I do, but yeah, I don't know. It's just fun to like. I know my parents were like, oh well, should we like order the issues or should we wait till all 4 of them come out? Because eventually there's 4 issues that are gonna come out, could be collectively released later. And I'm just like, well, obviously you want all of them and the digital version. Like, gotta collect them all. It's very Pokemon style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
why wouldn't you just have all of them?
4 issues though. So is that going to be the conclusion to Sister Grimm, or is that kind of the conclusion to the first arc?
That's the conclusion to the first arc. It's basically kind of like this is basically the arc behind this is like figuring out, letting go of who she was and kind of accepting who she is, and accepting with quotes.
Okay.
Basically, like it's kind of just maybe acquiescing to who she is. So yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Do you have anything in the works outside of Sister Grimm, or is this kind of just your main focus for the time being?
Babies with Rabies, it's the other thing. So I'm not 100%. I'm still kind of working on when my books are going to come, but I'm releasing that through my own website. So that's lacunningham.com. And it's going to be the fall. I was originally hoping for summer, but I had made the mistake of having another baby. So life is busy. And then there's so much stuff going on with ASAP and obviously releasing the comic and all the other great creators doing stuff. So it's very much finding the time to do things, and it's busy. And then with the pandemic, things are just slower. So I'm going to have to probably push it back to fall, but it's going to be coming out soon. I have a Comic-Con I'm going to in September. I'm kind of hoping that everything just magically happens right before then.
Yeah.
So I can just take all of the stuff there. So, but that'll be fun. It's my first like Comic-Con kind of selling stuff and as a creator, not just an attendee. So
Oh, that is really exciting. Do you want to give a shout out where it's going to be, or is that something you want to?
Yeah, no, yeah. It's the Edmonton Expo, and it's in September 17th, 18th, 16th. I think it's like I can double check that, but it's around there. If you just Google Edmonton Expo. So it's in Canada.
Oh, that is awesome. That's awesome. So I appreciate you coming on here, breaking down Sister Grimm, breaking down more of ASAP Imagination too. I always love getting the chance to kind of hear more of like what it's about and like what all goes into it. It was awesome to hear it from the editor-in-chief's like perspective too.
Yeah, it's fun to come talk.
So before we wrap up things completely though, I always love asking one question, because as much as this is a podcast where it's a nice promotion for you and your book, it's also a nice little learning tool for anyone who might be new, like a new creator, a new artist, or a new writer. And so with that being said, for anyone that's struggling just getting started with a script or an idea, what type of advice would you give them to kind of help them push through that that initial bump of just getting going?
You know what? I think one of the main things I had to learn was just like, I kept waiting for myself to be good enough to do something. And so I kept like not putting stuff out there. So I'd be like, oh, it's not ready. I'm like, oh, I need to learn this first. Oh, I should read this craft book first. Oh, I should read these comic books and learn from the masters. And I think at some point you just got to put yourself out there. You just got to put it out there and just like honor who you are in that moment. And you're like, this is the best I can do in this moment. And sure, you probably will get better, and you might look back on it later and just be like, oh, I shouldn't have put this out. But you know what? I don't think I don't think you need to do that, because you just basically did yourself the service at that moment in time. And if you just believe in it and just be like, yes, this is good enough. This is the best I can do at this moment in time. Because I think anything that's creative, you're never going to get to a point where you're like, I am the best I can be. I think there's always room to grow. So you're always just going to be better. And like, if you just wait for some weird line that you need to cross, I don't know if you're ever going to cross it. Essentially, you're just going to keep pushing it further, and there's always going to be that next target. So my advice is just do it, just put it out there. And I know once I met Hades, like he kind of had that same thing where he's just like gave me a deadline, and I'm just like, oh, that's so quick, like we want to have time to edit it 200 times. Like, and overthink everything. I know he bugs me for overthinking, but that's the great thing of like, again, working with someone else is like, just put it out there and just like see what happens. So that's definitely my advice for that.
No, I really love that, because the thing is, like, if you find yourself waiting, you're missing out on that experience. That experience is what would make you get better. It is just by doing it. That's perfect. We have Lance actually stopping in. Speak of the devil, stopping in to say awesome. Welcome, Lance. How are you doing? And then Mad Money Art saying that's great advice. I really think so too. Laurie, once again, thank you so much for coming on, breaking down Sistergram and everything in between. This was such an awesome conversation. Guys, if you are watching, the pre-order is in the comments. We're going to drop it down one more time so you guys have the opportunity to check it out. Let me pull this up real quick. I forgot I closed out of it to pull up the other links. Hold on one second. That awkward pause right now. The beauty of it is, though, I could just edit that out post-production, so.
Perfect.
Here is the link to pre-order. If you guys are watching, be sure to check it out. And if you're unable to pre-order, always share it. Word of mouth is free. It's essential. And you might have a friend that might be interested. We had Baron Von DC just bought it. Looks great. Baron, thank you for stopping and pre-ordering. Awesome. Well, guys, this is us wrapping things up. It is a beautiful, beautiful Friday. I hope you have a fantastic day. But most importantly, keep it geekly.